Normally you don't drink wine, but now when you're at a restaurant, you see a huge wine list in front of you. What wine to pick and how not to lose face if you don't drink wine often. Here is a couple of suggestions. My name is Garry and I'm a WSET3 qualified sommelier. Let's not waste time anymore. Okay, first things first, if you don't drink, you don't have to feel ashamed about that. If there is a sommelier at the restaurant, you can just say to him or her that you just don't drink wine too much, and he would be glad to have a couple of wine pairing suggestions. A good sommelier will always offer some nice pairing depending on the dish you want to order and considering your budget. And yeah, about the budget. It is also okay to say wine from which price category you want to order. I'm a sommelier, but sometimes I feel quite strange about the prices of the wine. Like a bottle may cost several $1,000s at a restaurant. And obviously not everyone is ready to pay that price. There is nothing wrong with stating the price point and letting the sommelier do the rest of the job. It is possible to find decent wines in any price category. A bottle of quality wine in retail costs about $20 or euros, and at the restaurant it's about $50 for the same bottle, but it really depends on the margins of the particular place. But the most interesting part starts if there is no sommelier at the restaurant. There is no person in charge of wine pairing with food, and consequently you have to decide yourself. Basically, in the wine list you have some white wines, some red wines, a couple of rosé wines, because they are not so popular probably, and it is not profitable for a restaurant to have a lot of rosé wines, especially if it is not a fine dining place or a specialized in wines place, and probably some sparkling wines, probably with a couple of champagnes as a must. Champagne is a very gastronomic wine. It goes well as an aperitif, it goes well with some appetizers, it may be good even with some snacks like potato chips. Yes, this pairing may seem quite unusual, but actually, if you enjoy crisps, it may be very pleasant. Champagne is just a nice option to start the dinner while you're not quite sure what you want to order, still looking for the options in the menu, and you want to have something in your glass that is 100% pleasing and easy to drink. And drinking a glass of champagne after the dinner also might be a nice option. Probably some sweeter champagne like demi-sec or even semi-sweet might work. If for some strange reason there is no champagne on the list and you want to try something in the same style but a bit different, you can go for Cremant or Cava or German Sekt. These are basically wines made by the same traditional method as champagne, but made in other regions, not in Champagne in France. Cremant is a French name for the wine, so it might be Cremant de Loire or Cremant d'Alsace. Cava is a Spanish Catalonian name, so it will be from a region not far from Barcelona. German Sekt also might be an option as well. So there is a lot of wines to choose from. These are probably a bit less complex than the original champagne, but they're all different and there are some nice wines for an affordable price there. Just explore and pick the one you like to try. And when the glass of sparkling wine is almost empty, we need to go for the wine for the first appetizer or salad or any first dish of the meal. The only rule here is that you don't have to order something too bulky that would overwhelm the taste of the dish. If it's a light fish appetizer and some fresh vegetable, something like that, you can go for a simple young white wine. The options are almost infinite, from a nice German or Alsatian Riesling to an unoaked Chardonnay style, basically from any region of the world, or some mineral white wines from the north of Spain like Albarino. There are really plenty of options. So for the first pairing, we are looking at white wines mostly, and if you are not quite sure if this wine is oaked, young or old, you just look at the year. Normally they state years of harvest of the grapes for a particular wine. Now it is 2024, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully not. The young wine is 2023 or 2022 year of harvest, because normally it takes about 6 months to make wine from the moment when the grapes were picked. Harvest time depends on the region and on the grape variety as well, but generally it is the end of the summer, the very end of the summer and autumn. It may be September, sometimes it is even November, sometimes even the first part of December for different wine styles, but it is more or less autumn time. 6 months from the time of the harvest of the grapes. It also depends, but normally it is enough if the wine is not intended to mature in oak or on the lees or something like that. If the wine is more than 2 years of age, probably it was aged in some way or undergone some practices in the winery, like malolactic conversion, maturation on the lees, which may add some complexity to the wine. And for the first course, we don't actually need a lot of complexity. The third glass of the dinner may be more complex already if paired with a full-weight appetizer like a tartare or some soup. The choice really depends on the dish here, but generally it could be a more full-bodied white wine or some lighter red wine. I think that light red wines are great for full-weight appetizers, so you can go for some Pinot Noir, like Pinotage, even some Cabernet Franc if the dish is something more substantial like a smoky meat or oily fish, some beef tartare probably. Once as a pairing for a beef tartare, Sommelier offered me a Pinot Noir from the Loire Valley, and probably I would suggest some more full-bodied wine like Cabernet Franc for instance. But yeah, light red wine or some fuller-bodied white like Burgundy may go extremely well with the first dish. Don't count the appetizers. Red or white depends on the ingredients of the dish and your personal preferences. A rule of thumb here is that white wine pairs well with fish and red wine pairs well with meat. It is still true, but to me it's more like that red wine can be a bit tricky to pair with fish because of the unpleasant metallic aftertaste that sometimes it gives to the dish. A very full-bodied white wine from some warmer regions might work as well with a meat dish. So 101 of wine pairing, red for meat, white for fish is still reasonable, but consider your own preferences as well. Coming up next is normally the main dish of the evening, which may be either fish or meat or even vegetarian, but generally we go up on the imaginary scale of the flavors, and consequently we need a more complex wine. The main principle of wine and food pairing that I stick to, and generally it is very common in the world of wine, is that wine should be in the same weight category as the meal. A raw beef steak is evidently heavier than a vegan vegetable stew, so the wines for these dishes will also be different. More intense wines normally command higher prices as well. Like if we take Valpolicella from Corvina grapes in Italy, it is normally about $10 per bottle, sometimes less. Amarone from the same grapes but dried almost like raisin Corvina grapes is about $50 and even more, $50. I'd say that it is more like a starting point for Amarone. And Ripasso, which is basically Valpolicella with some dried grapes from Amarone to add a bit of complexity to it, will cost like 15-20 euros. The more intense the flavors and the labor intensive is the wine, the more we'll have to pay for it, so you can just look at the prices and suggest that the wine is more intense and more suitable for the main dish depending on the higher price. It doesn't have any relation though to Pinot Noir because it may cost a big buck, although it is not a very intense wine in any case, but for the rest of the grapes it is more or less true. On the other hand, some intense wines like those from Côte d'Iron don't cost a lot. For about $20 you get an outstanding quality wine on the village level or even under the generic appellation Côte d'Iron. But yeah, some appellations produce quality wines on a budget, in others you pay a bit more for a prestige of the place, like you'll definitely pay more for a bottle of red Burgundy on the same quality level as Côte d'Iron. But yeah, it's like with cars, with watches, basically with anything in the world where you have more expensive brands and more quality on a budget style brand. And for the dessert, it is the same rule with one little exception, that the list of sweet wines is normally not that extensive as dry still wines. In most cases, we are just choosing from sweet sherry, port wine and Tokai, and the only piece of advice here is not to pick too sweet wine. It may seem strange, but sweet wines may be very sweet, like 500 grams of sugar per liter, so they are not sweet anymore. They are luscious, almost like a syrup. And a dessert might be just a subtle mousse or some naturally sweet fruit without lots of added sugar. So make sure that the wine doesn't seem like a sweet monster by the side of an almost neutral dessert. I had such an experience in a good fine dining place recently. I even have a video about this visit on the channel, you can check it out. The pairing for a coconut foam, almost neutral in taste, very tender, it had no sugar, was Hungarian Tokai Zamorodni, which normally is not as sweet as Tokai Aju, like 6 Putanyosh, but it is still very sweet. To me, a more adequate pairing would be some naturally sweet or even semi-sweet Riesling but it's all personal. It depends on the palate. Write down in the comments how do you normally choose wines for your dinner or in a restaurant. Check out my free newsletter where I share my tasting experiences once a week, and see you in the next video. Bye.